I felt that I had gone off the road because I hit a dip. And I started to send my dog back to the left to go, back onto the other part of the road.
Right, correct.
And I could feel it felt like something warm and light next to my dog on the other side. He would not go back that way.
Not good.
And he kept easing me around the corner. I wasn't threatened by it, but it did shake me up. And as I turned the corner, I could hear kind of this thing of something like, and you always told me you weren't afraid of the dark.
Oh, really?
To this day, I am convinced it was my grandmother standing at the corner of her road, making sure I made the turn back. And a few months after that, I told my mom about it. She went, yeah, Grandma would do that. She always watched out for you.
Mm-hmm.
The other one...
Well, they tell us, there's about to be another network story, incidentally, on angels, guardian angels. There's a lot of stories lately about that. And in those shows, you will see a lot of examples of relatives who are gone and yet act as guardian angels for those who remain.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. In the ongoing one that's going on, I live in a house that has a spirit. She is non-threatening. I first found out about her, about 6 months after we moved in. I kept hearing things and thinking it was our cat or, my dog going down the stairs or something. And I walked upstairs one day, and my daughter is talking in her room. And I went, Katie, who are you talking to?
Yes.
And she said, there's a man in the corner. And she described my grandfather, which would have been her great-grandfather. We found that out when I put up a picture of him and my grandmother in the front room, and she said, that's the man I talk to every day. So that would fit into your guardian angels. But the lady who lives here in this house built it. And I used to think with all these people walking up and down the stairs that it was just me hearing things. And I asked my brother about it because he had had the house before me, and he said, you're lucky, that's all you find. I used to see the doors move.
I wouldn't like that.
She's never threatened me. Every evening at 10 o'clock, she comes in the front door, and every morning about... You
mean the door opens?
It makes a noise that I cannot get it to make, and the keys turn in the lock, but the door itself does not move.
I couldn't handle that. I don't think I'd handle that well at all. Now maybe it is something you get used to, and you're about the second or third person I've talked to this morning who said, well, look, it's ongoing and I'm used to it and it doesn't bother me now, but I don't think I could be that way.
But you see, she's given me the impression that as long as we don't harm her house, she means no harm to me. And she did protect us from, we had someone try and break in here as I was trying to come in the front door one night, and she refused to let me get the door open until the people had gotten them out of the back.
That's quite a story, thank you. That is those are several, actually, guardian angel type stories. And there are a number of programs of that sort yet to air. There's been a series of them. Relatives who, I guess, are able to return or who are here, who are watching out for their loved ones. Unreasonable? If there's an afterlife? I don't think so. In fact, entirely reasonable, really, when you think about it. A little frightening, but certainly reasonable. We'll be back.
In the Kingdom of Nye, toll free at 1-800-618-8255. 1-800-618-TALK. First-time callers, 702-727-1222. 702-727-1222. Or use the wildcard line at 702-727-1295. This is Coast to Coast AM on the CBC Radio Network.
If you need proof, you may not find it here. On the other hand, collectively, as you listen, to deny the intelligent, articulate stories that you're hearing seems silly. Dear Art, my grandmother Lucy used to come to my family on certain days and tell us that she had seen the lady dressed in black. That day, somebody in the family would die. She was frighteningly right. For when she saw this woman, someone in the family always died on the same day. Lucy was the only one that could see the lady in black. That's Ryan from Kogo Land. On the wildcard line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, Art. This is Therese from Seattle.
Well, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we on the air now?
I sure hope so.
Oh, okay. I just turned off my radio.
Okay.
I have a couple to tell you about.
Go right ahead.
The first one, I was about 16 years old, and I had just moved up to Seattle to live with my dad. I had been living with my mother, and my grandmother had been living in the home. And when I left, we had been close pretty much all my life, but my teenage years, you know how kids are.
Sure.
And we kind of had our little disagreements and whatever. And one night, I heard someone call my name, and I woke up, and I thought I was hearing things, and I looked at the clock, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I laid back down, and I heard it again, and I looked up, and there was my grandma. And it was like she was coming down out of the ceiling.
Yes.
But I couldn't see anything except from the waist up, and her arms were outstretched toward me, and she said my name 2 or 3 times. And
Was she solid in appearance?
You know, she was like a kind of an opaque. I wouldn't say translucent, but, you know, it was kind of like she was airy, if that makes any sense.
It does. Oh, yes, it does.
Okay. And after she said my name 2 or 3 times, she just kind of vanished. And I felt at peace. I wasn't afraid. And I didn't really even think anything more about it than getting up to get a drink of water. It just seemed totally natural to me. And later on that morning, when everybody was up about 9 o'clock, my mother called. And when the phone rang, I said to my brother and to my dad, "That's Mom. Grandma died last night." And they looked at me like I was nuts. And my brother said, "Yeah, sure." And he picked up the phone, and it was my mother saying my grandmother had died in New Mexico at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, with the time change, it was the exact same time I heard my name being called.
Wow.
And I've always felt that was her way of making peace. And I never felt any guilt. I just felt like she understood. And it was just kind of a neat experience. And the next one kind of has to do with an angel.
Yes.
Although I never saw the angels. We had a big inaugural day storm here a couple years ago, and trees were blown down, and I live in an area where there's a lot of really old-growth trees and stuff, really big firs, and they don't have much of a root system, and many went down. And about 3 weeks after that, we had another bad windstorm, and I was so frightened. My heart was pounding and everything, and I had just read a book called Where Angels Walk.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I'm going to try this. You know, I believed in guardian angels as a kid. What the heck? So I just said, "Oh, Lord, please send your angels to protect me and stop this wind." And it immediately stopped. And my daughter was on her way to school that morning. She was on the way to the bus stop. And she said, "Mom, it was so weird." She said it was blowing and everything, and all of a sudden it was just like somebody turned off the switch. So I knew it wasn't my imagination. So that's just a couple of incidents.
A couple of very good stories, and I thank you.
Well, thank you. I love the program. I'm listening with rapt attention. I got all my lights on, though.
Good for you. Thank you. If you anybody with guts will turn off the lights. Turn them down. Better yet, light a candle. Of course, the only trouble with that is that when you do, you provide an inviting atmosphere. Don't you know that? I think many times people provide the atmosphere that allows... I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. They provide the atmosphere that allows the entrance of whatever these things are that we're talking about. So if you dare, provide the atmosphere. On the toll-free line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Sure, I thought it said that your newsletter came out, and I'd like to suggest that the title be changed to Beyond the Pale.
Yeah. Well, I take it that you are a skeptic.
No. Even though it does have a little bit of criticism of the contents, it also means that it's beyond the mediocre pack.
Well, I hope so. I think so. What we're doing is, I admit readily, a little different. A lot of the content in the newsletter is going to be very standard stuff, but a lot of it also will reflect what we do.
What do you mean by what you do?
Well, from time to time on this program, as evidenced by this morning's show and others like it that we do, we just sort of leave the beaten path and begin to talk about things that, frankly, a lot of others don't. Or if they do, they don't talk about it seriously.
Well, okay, I just thought that After Dark was used by two other people, and you'd lose the first impression.
Well, After Dark, though, indeed describes the time that we do what we do, sir. Thank you very much for the call. After Dark describes the time that we function in, doesn't it? Hello, Mr. Bell. One of my favorite uncles was my Uncle Lester, one of my father's brothers. We enjoy each other's company, did to a great degree. He loved to tell his war stories, and I was the only one in the family who ever seemed to never tire of them. We would always greet each other by sneaking up, I know about that, behind the other, giving a firm tap on the shoulder while standing behind the opposite shoulder. Of course, the recipient of the tap would look to the side that the tap came from, and no one would be there. Then he'd look to the other side, and there would be the pranking party. We played this game on each other just about every evening, every meeting. Uncle Lester died in 1972 of a rare blood condition. I lost a friend. While talking to my father face to face about our recent loss, I felt a definite, firm tap on my right shoulder. I turned and expected to see my mom. She wasn't there. I turned to my left. She wasn't there. I smiled and cried. Thanks, Art. Don from St. Louis County. On the toll-free line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning. Is this Art?
Yes, it is.
Hi, am I on the air right now?
I hope so, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't screen calls, ever. We just put people on the air.
Oh, great. Well, I heard you earlier speak about how animals are more receptive.
I believe they are.
Okay. Well, let me run this one past you.
Okay.
I had just come home from work. It was probably around 10. So it was dark outside.
10 o'clock at night. Okay.
Yeah. Well, my room is about 16 feet from the garage door, and that's from the inside. And I was just getting ready to go to bed, and I heard something, a loud crash in the garage, and I went out there, and we had a workbench out there. I turned on the light, and there was my cat sitting on the workbench. It had knocked over a can of gasoline, and apparently it drank some. Okay.
Oh boy.
Well, what happened was, what really got my attention was it was howling. It was just shrieking, and it took off. It was on a odd course. It was making circles, I'd say, around the floor.
This is a joke.
No.
No?
No. The cat was screaming at the top of its lungs, and the next thing I know, it heads straight for me, and I had no alternative. I shut the door. So the next thing I hear is like a scraping along the door, and then I hear a smack. Okay, a smack on the roof, and then I heard a loud crash on the floor, and that was about it. It really, I wasn't quite sure what happened until I went out later and found my cat. I apparently it ran out of gas.
I told you it was a joke. I've heard it. Thanks for the call. On the first-time caller line, you're on the air. Hi.
Hi, Art. This is Bill calling from the Seattle neighborhood of Capitol Hill.
Hi, Bill.
Hi. I've heard a lot of really crazy, fantastic tales tonight, but
That's
mine's
right.
kind of pretty much down-to-earth thing that maybe a first-timer might understand. When I lived in Lawrence, Kansas, I lived in a house that was said to have been haunted, and my roommate told me about, kind of strange poltergeist-type episodes and things.
Mm-hmm.
And one night I was sitting in this large room with a bunch of friends of mine, and one of my friends, my roommate's was out studying, and I thought he came home, and I saw him walk past the door, and I was going to, play a trick on him, kind of pat him on the back or jump on him or something.
Sure.
And he wasn't there. And then there's a bathroom at the end of the hall, and I thought he turned the corner in the bathroom, went in his room, and he wasn't there. And after I moved out of the house, people reported, I knew people that lived there, and they reported some really strange...
Uh-oh. He just got cut off. Sorry about that, sir. We didn't do it on this end. It was on your end. Wildcard line, you're on the air.
Good morning, Art. This is Ray in Sacramento.
Hello, Ray.
I have a short one for you. It's rather interesting.
Sure.
It happened to my wife. Before we got married, she was living in Massachusetts and I was in Florida. And she was living in the YWCA.
Right.
And she walked into, I believe it was either the library or the sitting room, a quiet sitting room in there. And she heard what sounded like a rocking chair going back and forth, the creaking rocking chair. And she's blind, and she had her guide dog with her. And she reached out. She finally got up enough nerve. She was listening to this for quite a little while, and she got up enough nerve to reach out to touch to see if the chair was really there. And the minute she reached out, it stopped and it was gone.
How weird.
It was extremely weird. She told me this 6 years ago, and I still remember it.
Well, these are things that stick with you, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They are.
I appreciate your call, sir. Thank you. These things stick with you many times for life. You don't forget them. Why? Because they suggest the possibility, or even the probability, collectively, of an afterlife. All right, listen, turning away for a moment from the ghosts. On the wildcard line, you're on the air. Hi.
Well, good morning, Art. This is Rick, a rebellious cab driver calling from Portland, 1190 KEX.
You betcha.
I'll relate a quick tale. I mean, it's not a tale, Art. It happened. On June 11th, 1970, I was attending an international drama conference in Bloomington, Indiana, at Indiana University.
Mm-hmm.
It was about 10:30 that night. It was a Thursday. There was a full moon rising. I was walking back with another member, a delegate of the Oregon delegation to the convention. We had just attended the last play for that night. We were walking along some shrubbery. I remember there was a hedge and trees off to my right, and I'm talking with my friend. I look over to my right, and I stopped cold in my tracks. There was a woman in the woods staring at me. She was absolutely out of place, Art. She was wearing white clothing reminiscent of clothing that I would see in 1930s movie, right down to her hairstyle.
Yes.
I couldn't see her eyes. I glanced at her for a moment. Like I said, I stopped cold. I looked at my friend. I said, Jeff, and I turned my head back to the right, and she was gone. I couldn't figure out where she could have gone to. There was enough of a hedge there. I couldn't get over it. I felt compelled to follow this hedge around off the sidewalk, probably about 30 yards, 40 yards off away from the sidewalk. My friend was with me. We rounded another corner. At that moment, the bushes to the right began to shake violently. There was no wind that night, Art. My friend took off running.
I would too.
I found myself standing in front of a stone wall that was about 2 feet high. What I was looking into was an old cemetery. that was hidden by the hedge and the shrubbery, which is actually on the campus at Indiana University.
Oh, wow.
Okay, I stepped over it. I walked, I don't know, Art, maybe 30 feet into the cemetery. I stopped and I looked down the moonlight or the street light or whatever was illuminating it. I stopped and looked down at a headstone. I remember the woman's name was Mary. The date of death was 1936. And I looked at it and I realized that the headstone was shattered. I looked up while I was trying to, gather what this all meant. And I saw her again, probably about 20 to 25 yards away from me, moving across the cemetery from the right to the left, and this time she just faded away. And that was about the time, I started looking around, and I realized that all of the headstones were smashed. All of them vandalized. I was consumed with this incredible fear, panic.
Yes.
Anyway, other members of the Oregon delegation saw me running. There's a wooded area, nearby. It was probably about a half a mile away. I mean, I don't know where I was running to, Art, but I was leaving. I was gone. They ran. They caught up to me. They stopped me. No one had reported the vandalism. I believe to this very day that the woman wanted someone to see what had happened in there.
Wow, what a story. And you swear this is a true story?
Art, I can see her looking at me. That first glance to this very day, it's a snapshot that is in my mind forever.
I cannot imagine that that would not change your life in some way. Many ways, maybe.
Yeah, of course it did, Art. I mean, there was immediate, tangible evidence.
I understand. I understand, sir. I've got to go. I'm at a break. Thank you very much for the call. There's another one.
Continue with your calls to the Kingdom of Nye and Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. Now here again is Art.
Good morning. It's a dark night out there. This is the annual Halloween program, and it's a good one. Boy, there have been some good stories. If you want a copy of this program, we can make it available to you. And I can understand you might want to archive this one. You can get a copy of this program by calling 1-800-917-4278. Getting a lot of faxes already asking about that. Yes, it is one of those that we make available. And they do a very good job of it, too. They exorcise all of the commercials. And they put it on a high-quality tape and get it to you quickly. Indeed, the ordering process has now been speeded up, and we think you will not have trouble getting through because there are a gazillion operators standing by. So if at any point you decide you want a copy of this program or any guest program we do here, or special program of this sort, the number to call is 1-800-917-4278. In addition, that is the number you call if you would like to subscribe to our brand new newsletter called After Dark. Maybe we should call it Beyond the Pale After Dark. 1-800-917-4278 with Visa and MasterCard only. On the wild card line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art. This is Greg in Linwood, Washington.
Hi, Greg.
And I got a pretty unique story.
Good.
That happened to me when I was living in the vicinity of Oakland, California.
Yes.
I don't know. I had two really bad things happen to me that week. I lost a real good union job. A day later, a transmission went out on my truck, and
Boy,
I was.
Isn't it the way when it rains it pours?
Yeah. And there's, no expecting, they just shouldn't have happened, but they did. And then I hired this this old black man to help me tear down a chimney and rebuild it.
Yes.
And this house was located, probably one of the oldest houses in Berkeley, and it was kind of a creepy old house to begin with. The landlord said he could never keep a tenant in there for more than a few months.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think much of it. I worked on it once before, and anyway, I spent all morning. We built a scaffold. We were very careful. I was taking all the precautions and just lowering bricks down to him in a bucket.
Sure.
And I had a brush pushed up against the bottom of my the base of the chimney, right close to where the roof meets the chimney.
Right.
And it's one of these brushes off a push broom, so it was a large wooden brush, back, like a horsehair brush.
Yes.
And just out of the blue, just before 12 o'clock noon, that brush took off on its own, started, sliding down the roof. It went over the gutter, and it fell 18 or more feet, and it hit my my helper in the top of the head. He wasn't wearing any hat or anything. And I went down there, and I was really upset because that was the third and the worst thing to happen to me all week long.
Sure.
And later on, we worked a little bit longer, and I went home, and I was the only one that in my family down there, and I decided I hadn't talked to my dad for about a month or so, and I called him, out of just to hear a familiar voice.
Yes.
And he's up here in Seattle, and I says, well, I hope your week is going better than mine. And he says, my wife died today. And I go, what time? And he says, around noon. And I go, well, I'll be up there, in about a day or two. I'll see you when I get up there. And I found out when I got up there that she had actually died, just about that same time that my friend got hit in the head. And that a few, not long after she died, my stepbrother's wife gave birth to a baby girl just a few minutes after she died, about, 1 or 2 floors above her in the same hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then I was the one that called my father, and I don't know. To me, it was just kind of a...
Strange time?
Very strange.
Thank you for the call, sir. Well, I don't know if that's exactly a ghost story, but I've heard similar things from other people, and that is, there are certain times in our life when, without explanation, there is one dramatic event that follows another. A series of dramatic events, connected or not connected. Very dramatic, very sometimes life-threatening, life-changing events. And they seem to come together. Now, what does that mean? That there is something at that moment affecting our life that that is out of the norm, shall we say, or not? I don't know. On the wildcard line, you're on the air.
Hello, Art.
Hello.
This is Mike in Phoenix.
Yes, Mike.
This is an event that just happened a week ago Monday.
All right.
One of my employees came into work, and he has some weird dreams sometimes, but he came in and he says, I got to tell you about this dream. And he says, I had this dream that I was standing in a front yard of a house, and I was filming with this old video camera that my mom had given me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was standing there, and there was a white picket fence, and there was an open gate. And his girlfriend's, first of all, his mother came walking through the gate, and his mother had just died this past, I think it was February.
Oh.
And then following her was his girlfriend's grandfather.
This is all in the dream?
Yes, in the dream.
Yes, all right.
And he had just died this past year also. And then following behind him was his girlfriend's grandmother.
Kind of a March of the Dead.
Yes, and he described actually, he didn't know who the last lady was because he had never seen her.
Yes.
And he described her to his girlfriend, and she said that that was her grandmother, and she was wearing a pink dress with a bow on it. And she said that's what my grandmother. That's her favorite dress that she wants to be buried in. Hmm. And so he told me about this dream. This was a week ago Monday. And 2 days later, on Wednesday, he came into work late, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry that I'm late. My girlfriend's grandmother just died."
Wow.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Really weird. Yes, thank you very much. I wasn't sure where the video was fitting in all of. I guess I was just in the dream. On the toll-free line, you're on the air.
Good morning, Art. Rusty in Kansas City. What's up?
Hello, Rusty.
Well, how's the stories going tonight so far?
Well, if you've been listening, Rusty...
I haven't. I just got in.
I see. Do you have one for us?
I most certainly do.
Go ahead.
I'm 23 now, but at the time I was about 12 years old, and my family and I moved into a house at a residential lake here in Missouri. The houses there at this lake are pretty old. In our basement, I don't know if it's totally relevant, but there was a lot of natural rock. I don't know if you go through the woods, you see like ridges and stuff.
Yes.
Of rock. Well, that was how our basement was full of that. And there was actually, if you were small enough, you could get back and like go into caves and stuff in our house, in the basement.
Wow.
That was just the creepy part. We had a lot of harmless incidences happen as far as leading to the basement. A door, they cut the door out of the natural wood walls. I mean, the wooden walls, they cut the door out. It was made out of the wall with just hinges.
Oh, I've got you.
And a lot of times it just had a little latch, and a lot of times out of nowhere this little latch would just flip up and the door would open, and then minutes later it would close and the latch would go back. Now this happened several times, and we lived there for about 2 years, and it got to the point where we were actually used to it. There were a lot of other smaller incidents.
That's what a lot of people have said this morning, Rusty, that people live in haunted houses or houses where these things are occurring, and it finally gets to the point where it doesn't scare them, it doesn't even bother them, you just get used to it, and you live with it, and it's part of what you live with.
Exactly. At the time, though, I was 12 years old, and 2 bedrooms were upstairs, 1 bedroom was downstairs. That was my room, by itself.
Okay, thank you very much for the call, Rusty. There's another case, and isn't that interesting? Something that would scare me and turn me different colors, I'm sure, pale white, very pale white. Other people just learn to live with after a while. My cat Polo and I are enjoying being frightened by your Halloween tales. Here in Hawaii, we don't have goblins, but we do have menehunis, little people who accomplish strange things in the night. Aloha, Malia. On the first-time caller line, you're on the air. Hi.
Yes, Art, how you doing?
Just
this
fine.
Is Kevin in New Orleans.
Yes, Kevin.
Yes, I have 2 quick ghost stories to tell you about. My girlfriend lives in a place called Chalmette, Louisiana.
Yes.
And her house was buried on Chalmette Battlefield. And her mother and father would always tell me about these ghost stories that they would happen in the house and everything. And I never really believed it too much, you know. So I would always make fun of it and everything. And we went and rented a bunch of ghost stories from the video store. And we're all in the living room together alone. And we're watching Amityville Horror.
Yes.
And he has this stereo hooked up to his TV. Well, it wasn't on at the time, but about halfway through the movie, the stereo just blasts on out of nowhere. And I mean, it's really loud.
Right.
And he jumps up, and he checks it, and he turns it off. And he just looks at me and shrugs it off like, well, you know, these things happen all the time. And I'm like, well, you know, it never happened when I was there. You know, always told me about it, but I've never seen anything like that happen before.
New Orleans and Louisiana in general strikes me as a place that is old, ripe with a lot of tradition, and it's kind of a place where ghosts would be.
Yes, sir. We just had it right up in our article in our paper today about ghost stories in New Orleans, and seems to be a lot of superstition going around, especially with the old French Quarter and the Battle of New Orleans and everything. A lot of old cemeteries and such.
I'm sure there are. It's just the right kind of atmosphere. Thank you. And again, relating to atmosphere, folks, Even this program, as you sit this morning and listen to it, provides the kind of atmosphere that will allow things to occur. So I'm not going to be surprised, and I'm sure you should see the stack of stories that I have. I'm never going to get through all of them today. The fax machine has just been burning up in the other room. I'm never going to get to them all. But before it's over, I guarantee I will get stories of things that have occurred during this program. And I believe the reason for that is atmosphere. Or, as I used to say in the 60s, set and setting. That's kind of an old drug expression, set and setting. We are providing the set and setting for the introduction of whatever it is that we're going to hear about. And I guarantee that over the next few days, and I will catch you up on it, you will hear of things that occurred during this program, in fact, because of this program. On the first-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Oh, good spine-tingling morning to you, Mr. Bell.
Yes, indeed. Where are you calling from?
Red Desert, Wyoming, but my residence is in Oregon.
Red Desert, Wyoming?
Yes, it's up on Interstate 80.
Okay.
I'm on a cellular phone, so I'm going to pull over the side of the road. I had two incidents happen to me in my life, and but they're both very long details, so I'll only give you one.
All right.
We moved into a house about 13 years ago. It's a mobile home. And a couple after we moved in, strange things started happening, but they'd never happened when my husband was around. My jewelry had come up missing. Important telephone numbers, I'd leave by the telephone. If I left the room, like overnight or had gone to work, they would come up missing. All kinds of strange things started happening, and I talked to my husband about it, and he thought I was flipping my wig. And he really thought, I had really lost it. Had this really bad feeling of foreboding coming over me constantly, almost like a depression type thing.
I know about those, yes.
And I called some people in the church, and they came out, and they would not do an exercise on the house, but they did give it a blessing. And that did not seem to help. In fact, after the blessing, things seemed to get exaggeratally worse. And one day my son came home from school, and I was at work, and stood there and talked to my husband for several minutes, went to his room, came back out, and my husband was gone.
Yes.
And that night, when I came home from work, he says, "Mom, where's Dad?" And I said, "Well, I suppose he's at work. He's a long-haul truck driver." And I hadn't expected him home until the weekend. And he says, "Mom, Dad was here. I talked to Dad." And the first thing came over to my mind was, oh, my God, he's been killed in a wreck, because
Yes.
you've heard stories of, family coming back.
All night long.
And so I immediately called his work, and no, he hadn't been in an accident. They hadn't heard from him, and everything seemed to be fine.
Good.
So that night, I was just on pins and needles. That night, my husband called home, and I was just relieved, you're okay. And I told him what happened, and he said, "Well, both of you are losing it." Well, we had gone over to our neighbor's house, and things were really weird going on in the house. I'd be standing at the stove and watch people walk through my living room. I'd be standing at the kitchen sink, and I'd watch people walk through my living room.
What kind of people? Solid?
No, apparitions.
Apparitions.
Yeah, just, very faint, very light people walking through.
Yes.
And things, like I said, things continue to disappear, things we've never been able to find since either. So we talked to my neighbors, and they'd lived there, many more years than we had. And they said, "Well, this is the old Barlow Trail, which, where we live." And I said, "Well, yes, I understand," which is the shortcut off of the Oregon Trail going to Salem, Oregon, instead of taking the Oregon Trail on into Oregon City.
Yes.
And I said, "Yeah, I realize that." And they said, "Well, you do realize that when a group of settlers would stop and camp, there was a group that stopped here, where we are."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "No, I didn't know this." and a renegade band of Indians had come in and massacred the people.
Oh, there we go.
And I said, oh, well, this is wonderful. Why didn't we know about this before we moved in? And so our neighbors continued to tell us that in their back bedroom, where her daughter used to stay when she was living at home, sometimes during the night, they could hear this moaning, crying sound. And one night, Richard was up. He'd come home from work, and he was up and had gone back. He heard the moaning and the crying, and the girl was trying to open the door, and he was on the outside trying to open the door. And as long as the moaning was going on, they couldn't get the door open.
Wow.
But when the moaning quit, the door just opened, almost through both of them, through the wall, because it just opened so fast. And so we got to, really, my husband didn't believe all this, so they told him again what their experience had been. This happened several times.
Okay, we've got to hurry here.
Okay. So one night, my husband was home on the weekend, and we'd gone to bed. And I used to pry the doors shut so they wouldn't open, because I'd come home and find doors open, kitchen cabinets open, refrigerator open, dishwasher running. And we went to bed, turned out the light, and just, bam, the back door flew open. And we got up, got our guns, got up, went to the back door, nothing there. Never had any problems with them since.
Weird story. Well, thank you. Thank you for relating that and calling us.
Thank you very much for taking it.
Take care. One of the photographs in the newsletter, not the one I told you about earlier, taken by the stonemason, but the second ghost photograph that's being published in the newsletter, I hope it comes out well. It is one that was taken in Louisiana. It was taken near a farm in Louisiana. And there are, it's hard to count, but perhaps as many as 10 apparitions that are in various stages of visibility. Some of them you can see right through them. Some of them are almost completely solid. And they are dressed in what appears to be period costume, perhaps from the 1800s. And this has impressed me for a long time as well. So this is also published in the newsletter. You tell me what you make of it. On the toll-free line, you're on the air.
Hello, Art. How you doing?
Just fine, sir.
Yeah, there were two ghost stories I wanted to tell, and one concerns my mother, and the other concerns my Aunt Rita.
All right.
Now, Aunt Rita is my aunt that died 27 hours after birth. And what happened was my mother had died, and I received a telegram in the mail. And I called home and finally found out that she had passed away. Mm-hmm. So what happened was that, this is kind of strange, though it's really a ghost story. What happened was, my sister Nancy, she is a practical nurse, and when I called and found out my mother had passed away, my sister told me that the priest and the doctor that examined the body pronounced her dead and signed a death certificate, a blessed death. So Nancy, shortly after that, had a little baby girl. It was about a 8-pound baby girl.
Yes, sir.
And it was on a heart monitor. And what happened was that Nancy heard the heart monitor go off, and she went into the other room to run in, and right there in the archway, she was standing there, and there was this really beautiful woman. And she looked at the baby and knelt down at the crib and kissed the baby and looked at my sister and said, "Boy, she's beautiful," and then she vanished in front of her.
Oh, ho, ho.
And what happens is my sister Nancy told my other sister that it was my mother, that she could tell it was her from the pictures that she had of her years ago, only she was younger.
Wow. We're going to have to leave it there because I'm way out of time, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll split this in half, and that's easy because it is in 2 halves, and we'll do the other half right after the news at the top of the hour. This is Ghost to Ghost AM.
From the Kingdom of Nye, you're hearing Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell on the CBC Radio Network.
Good morning. Welcome back to the program. Finishing up Dear Art, I live in a haunted house. Would find it tough to live anywhere else. I don't bother them. They don't bother me. It's kind of like having roommates. The worst thing about them is they scare the bejesus out of anybody that encounters them for the first time. It's kind of laughable. You can tell any number of people about these entities or things, but until they run into them face to face, I find they have very little to talk about. It's much more interesting to ask someone in and let them work on their own versions of their story. Needless to say, the conversation livens. Cold spots are entities. As I understand it, they take the energy at hand, heat, light, EMF, and use it to create themselves or whatever, and that is the drawing that creates the coldness. Some of the other effects that people perceive, I've been told, that basically fear is a rush of energy and can move things to other levels, not always desirable. Some entities feed upon those fears like an addiction, taking more and more. Draw your own conclusions. Mike in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Art.
Hello.
Yeah, this is Ruthie from Renton.
Ruthie from Renton. All right, Ruthie, welcome.
Yeah. Well, starting with the guardian angel, when I was 4 years old, my brother was 16, and he kept saying, like, February of that year, that he was going to go somewhere and never return. And my father used to say, well, don't forget your bike. And he says, I won't need my bike. And he says, and a year later, my friend Walter will go. And so in June of that year, he drowned, and a year later, his friend Walter died too. But right now, I'm a widow, and my husband's with me. And he'll come, he'll massage my feet. I'll hear glass being cut in the corner, and nothing will be there.
Wow.
But one night, I got home from work at 12:30, and I had to be at work again at 7 a.m., and I couldn't sleep. And all of a sudden, I heard a loud noise coming down the hall, and it came about halfway down, and then it was quiet. And then I felt like a size of a $50 pressure on my forehead,
yes,
and I was out like a light. He put me to sleep.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
And now I sleep with a flashlight on my pillow in case I hear anything like that again. Because I don't want to be put to sleep.
I understand, but I wonder if you also would want to see what the flashlight would reveal.
Yeah, if anything.
That's it. Thank you for the call. Take care. You know, how do you digest this? How do you digest the fact that so many intelligent, otherwise very normal people would tell these stories? Mass hallucination? Doubtful. What is it? Why would so many people tell these stories if there was not something to it? Well, Art, they just want it to be true. Hallucination? I don't think so. On the first-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is Mike in Chico, California, KPAY.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, I have a really interesting story. Back in 1973, I was enlisted in the Air Force. I was working for a SAC detachment out of Mississippi, and I happened to be on a gate shack that evening. It was, I looked at my watch, it was right around 3:05, and I happened to look out the window of the shack, and I saw a man standing there in an Air Force uniform. He had a captain's insignia bars on his shoulders, and he was standing there with his helmet underneath his arm and his head inside the helmet, and he looked at me and he said, "Where's my airplane and where's my crew chief?"
Yes.
And I kind of closed my eyes and I opened them up again, and he was gone. And so the next morning when I walked back into the control room. I happened to be going through, they have kind of like a library of lights that have been in and out of different places. And
Absolutely.
And I remember the name on his uniform. It was Captain Brown. And I was looking through some documents of different flights, and I noticed a B-52 that had left this particular base at 3:05 in the morning, and it crashed 7 minutes later.
Oh, my.
And the name of
Captain
the captain
Brown.
that flew the aircraft was Captain Brown.
Of course. Oh, boy.
That was kind of an interesting
That's
story.
quite a story, yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for the call. Even in the military. These stories come from across the board. Dear Art, I have a ghost story I'd like to share with your listeners. My grandmother had lived with my family for over 10 years. At age 84, was very much in control of her mental faculties. In January of 72, she passed away several months following a massive stroke. In her last days, she lost lucidity and would frequently cry out that she was dead, breaking down into mournful sobbing. 2 nights after Grandma's funeral, my brother and I sat awake in our beds, rehashing the day's events, as was customary for us before falling off to sleep. From my grandmother's now vacant room, there came a knocking noise, the familiar creak of her closet door. Spellbound, we strained for the slightest sound. A minute later, the unmistakable sound of my grandmother's slippered feet, shuffling on the tiled floor, grew louder as they approached the threshold of our opened door from the adjoining hallway. We were completely speechless. I'm sure my facial expression matched my brother's pop-eyed look. The next night, a short time after I'd fallen to sleep, my brother called out my name. He excitedly asked me, "Did you hear that? Listen." Again, the familiar foot shuffle of Grandma came from the living room and hallway outside our room. That was the last occasion of our supernatural experience, but the recollection is still clear to both my brother and I. I believe our experience made us both far less skeptical of other ghostly tales. That's a story from Chris in Wasilla, Alaska. On the toll-free line, you're on the air. Hi.
Art?
Yes.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, sir.
This is Ben out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Yes, sir.
And, I was just listening to some of the stories here, and, man, bone-chilling. I got 2 really quick stories for you.
Fire away.
In about 1979 or 1980, we were living in Illinois. My mom, with my brother and myself, she just got a recent divorce, and we were living in a little apartment, and she had a truck driver friend over, and big guy, huge guy, 320 pounds.
Yes.
The place was a little haunted. It was a little weird sometimes. We just didn't know sometimes why or what. My brother and myself left the apartment. It was early evening, and my mom and this guy was in the living room just with the...
Okay, we've got to hurry along here.
All right, with a candle, and they heard someone running in the hallway, trip and fall down, and this guy jumped up and he says, "Hey, you okay?" And there was no one there.
Weird.
No one there at all. We don't know anything about that, you know?
Weird, sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another time...
Well, okay, we'll have to hold it there. We're out of time. I'm sorry, and I've got to move on. We're so short on time. On the wild card line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. This is John from San Diego.
Hi, John.
Yeah, I got a story for you. I used to work at a custodian at a movie theater where they show 6 movies in one building.
Yes.
Well, one day one of our projection guy passed away, had a heart attack, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, a couple of days later, all the employees were talking about some strange things happening in the theaters, like lights flickering off and on, doors slamming. ice machine falling apart or something like that. And within that week, we were working, and assistant manager came up to us, and he was asking us if we called him, and we said no, we didn't call him at all. And he said he heard someone calling his name, and we said it wasn't us because we were too busy working in one of the theaters, cleaning up theater.
Right.
And even within that week, still, 5 of us decided to find out what was going on. So we brought a tape recorder and set it in one of the theaters and left that theater and shut the light off.
Right.
And we went in the other theater to clean for a while, and took us about an hour to clean, and went back to that theater to pick up the tape recorder, went outside and listened to it, and we heard the chair go down and spring right back up by itself.
Huh.
And that was strange. And when we went back inside the theater, we heard this faint music, real faint music, and we looked all over the room and the building, and we came to the projection doorway. We could hear the music faintly.
Yes.
And we thought it was somebody with a timer radio that was that turned on by itself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we checked with the projection guy, and he said they didn't have no radio like that in the projection room. That was the strangest part, because a lot of other things happened in there.
Well, I'll tell you, sir. Thank you. What I get out of that, or what I guess I would like to ask the audience about, and I don't understand a lot about entities or why things are haunted, but people seem to stay in the rough same physical location that they die in. And I'm trying to figure out what that tells us. Does that mean that a spirit or entity trapped on Earth is trapped in, or maybe even trapped is not even the right word, but is present in the exact physical location where it lost its life? I mean, it's such a recurring theme that you've got to wonder about that. Art, at one time, I lived in a very old apartment building in Bothell, Washington. One day it became apparent to me that a dog was sharing the apartment with my roommate, Joe, and I. The sound of little toenails in the kitchen, panting, scratching, signs of lapdog accidents, like plants being knocked over and little puddles appearing mysteriously. They happened at regular intervals. The one big problem is that we don't have a dog, you see. I eventually brought this up with Joe over a beer after work. Joe shot up and said, yeah, a little white one. To which I said, you've seen it? He said, well, no, it's just the impression I got. After some comparison of our experiences, we came to the conclusion that it was a ghost dog and that he was our pet. Of course, our friends got a good laugh at our expense during the weekly card game, but they stopped the teasing when everyone at the card table heard the dog as it walked up, panted a little, wagged its tail against our ankles. Joe and I reacted by reaching down to pet the dog simultaneously. Of course, there was no dog there. Later, we learned that a little white dog lived there and had been run over by a car. On the wild card line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. This
hello.
is Darkman,
Yes.
Seattle.
Yes.
I've got a story that took place when I was in 5th grade, around 1966.
Yes.
And, my stepfather, his name is Jim, he's a spelunker. You know what that is?
Yes.
Okay, well, he decided he wanted to take me around investigating caves one weekend, and I've never liked caves since then. The Oregon caves that was kind of nice, but what ended up happening was every cave he went into, he wanted to go as far back as he could go.
Well, of course.
And yeah, well, that was fine until we got to the Oregon Wind Caves, and I got to the entrance of the cave. There were some scouts. This is kind of freaking me out to remember it, and it's kind of late too. Got all the lights out as you've requested, and these scouts were kind of getting ready to go in, and I told Jim, I said, look, I don't want to go into this one. I can't do it. And he got angry with me because he really wanted to go to the back of this one because it wasn't that deep.
Right.
Take about an hour and a half or something like that to get to the back of it. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he figured that we could get in and get out before it got too dark. Well, I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. This is too scary for me. He says, well, fine. Then let's go up here. There's this hole. I want you to take a picture of me down looking up at you from, the top of this hole. This
Sure.
is where the wind blows up, and this is how the caves get their name.
Sure.
Well, I took the picture of him down there, and he was waving, and I heard this sound. And it did not, Art, it didn't sound human, okay? It didn't sound like wind, it didn't sound human. It was too weird for my, fifth grader mind to comprehend. I just thought that this was just kind of a sign, don't go in there. So I told him, look, I can't, Jim, I cannot go in there. Something is wrong. Well, these scouts went in there, and we left. Okay, well, the next day, and Jim never really he was rather angry with me for the whole thing, and the next day, Mom came out, and I was out raking the leaves, and she says, what happened yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, because Jim we heard a report on the radio about a woman that was killed, and there's a woman that was killed, and she was taken out, and apparently she was left in this cave. And I just went dead inside. And I asked him about it later, and he said, well, it's nothing. Forget about it. Well, I asked Mom about it later. I said, what did you hear on the radio?
Okay, we've got to rush to a conclusion.
Okay, I'll make it very quick. There was a woman that was killed in Salem, Oregon. Her body was taken to the back of the wind caves. She was found by a scouting troop that entered the caves around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the Sunday that I was there with Jim. They entered just after we left. Basically, that's the end of the story. It's just...
Well, I was going to ask you what came out on the film.
What came out on the what?
Film? The picture?
Film?
The picture you took?
Oh, just Jim, smiling up at me from the hole.
All right, nobody else smiling up. All right. Art, boo. Happy Halloween from Kinko's Portland, the Graveyard Crew. And I've got a lot of similar greetings, and I've got stacks now of ghost stories that I'm never going to have time to tell you all about. From Linda in New Orleans, Art, thanks for a great show. Maybe next year you could call the show Things That Go Perump in the Night. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
Art.
Yes.
Oh, this is Lucky out of Seattle.
Yes, hi, Lucky.
I don't know if this is a ghost story or not, but...
Well, that's all we're taking, so it better be.
Well, what it is here is my father left when I was about 2 years old, and I'd never known his whereabouts, and up until about a year ago, I'd never known. Well, anyway, I'd had a phone number. I'm a descendant from an Indian family, and I'd had a phone number on how to get a hold of him.
Right.
And, well, what we did was I had this phone number probably for 2 years. One morning I woke up and just out of the blue just called. And it was to a tribal office in South Dakota. Anyway, I'd called, and this gentleman had told me that he thought that my father was deceased. And after further review, he had called me back, and he said that he had deceased. But the thing that was weird about it was he told me that, and I never knew this, that March 31st was my father's birthday. And that was the day that I had called him.
Wow.
And
well, that's either ESP or it's a good ghost story. Thanks for the call.
From the Kingdom of Nye, This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell on the CBC Radio Network.
Good morning. It is Saturday morning on Halloween weekend, or Monday morning, depending on when you're hearing this program. But in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter what day it is. It's ageless, isn't it? These are ghost stories, real ones, from real people, all of you. Scarier than any sort of guest I could put on, because it's coming from all of you and it's real. That's what it's all about. That's what this program is all about. And we now continue on the toll-free line. You're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, Art. It's Kim from Olympia.
Hi, Kim.
My ghost story kind of pales in comparison to some of them I heard tonight. But my bedroom, I have a bed. My TV's at the foot of my bed, and I have a big bird on an open perch. It's a blue and gold macaw.
Right.
And my roof always leaked just in this one little place. And so we finally got tired of messing with it. We put plastic over the hole, over where it leaked at.
Well, sure.
And it's always been a familiar sound hearing my husband walking around back and forth that they're working on it. Well, one night, he was down at his shop working, and I was in bed watching some good trash TV. And I heard him go up there, and I figured, well, he's just fixing the plastic. You know, it had blown off or something. It's really late at night. And I waited through 3 commercial breaks because I was all cozy and didn't want to get out of bed. And finally, my bird kept getting upset. Whenever I get in bed, he goes to bed. And my bird kept pacing back and forth. And he kept pacing back and forth. And I thought, daggum it, it's, bothering him. And pretty soon he goes, rock, makes a really loud sound. I go, he's going to wake my kids up. So I got out of bed to go yell at my husband. And right when I got to the door to open it, my husband opened the door. And the walking stopped.
Oh.
Yeah. That's my ghost story.
What do you think it was?
My husband said, see, it's general knowledge in my family that I'm chicken. I'm afraid of everything. I don't do ghosts. And he said that it may have been someone close to us who passed on that wanted to make contact but not make me afraid. You know, it was something that I was very familiar hearing because it sounded just like my husband up there walking. I've heard it for years.
Thank you for the call.
Bye-bye.
Take care. I can imagine it would be so if there is an afterlife, and I am convinced there is. Then there would be nothing that anybody would want to do more than to contact, to comfort, or to somehow link with the loved one they left behind. So I don't find it strange that we get these sorts of stories. I would be surprised if they were any other sort of story. It's always it seems a link to somebody that has known the person who was alive, or many times it appears to be a guardian angel kind of story. And occasionally the story of a spirit that has died under very troubling conditions, a very violent, unexpected death, that sort of thing. Toll-free line, you're on the air. Hi.
Good morning. Excuse me. This happened to me, or when I was in Europe about 10 years ago, and both my parents are archaeologists, and they had been digging at a Gallo-Roman dig on the Luxembourg-Belgian border for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we always stayed at a house that was sort of on a low, bald mountain, forested. 2 villages were nearby, Pétange on the Luxembourg side and Rodingen on the Belgian side, and the dig was nearby, the Tilburg. And we always had a crew of student diggers that would dig with us. And one year we were having a dinner. It was nearing the end of the season, the summer season when we were digging there. And we had a dinner, and all the students were there and stuff, and it was kind of a drizzly, semi-foggy night.
Sure.
And it was getting sort of late in the evening, and we were getting ready to go to bed, and my brother and I, because we were pretty young, we were, 10 or so, and one of the girls that was a student digger went out on the porch, and she was out there for about 5 minutes, and she came back in, and I remember because we were just getting ready to go to bed, and she really looked just horribly scared and was like trembling and so forth, and she said that she had seen some kind of weird hippie guy across the road just at the tree line going south from, again, where we were staying.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of freaked everybody out, but, we thought, oh, it's just some weird guy that had wandered up from Pétange, which was maybe like a mile and a half, 2 miles away down this small mountain. Anyway, we didn't think that much about it, but, you know, still addressed the issue in the town later on. We asked, you know, the grocer and stuff, you know, why would someone be up there? And there weren't any people in this town. This was in like the early 70s and in kind of a rural area there. There weren't any people that really would likely fit that kind of description, because she said it was like this really wild-looking hippie guy that was just standing there staring at her. And then we heard the story that during World War II, when the Nazis had occupied this area, that there was a guy who had lost his wife in the occupation and had gone crazy and had run off to live in the woods. And he had, you know, whatever, lived roughly and stuff, and he'd become hirsute and so forth. And anyway, he had been hunted down and killed by the Nazis, you know, for whatever reason. They didn't want this kind of thing going on or something. And no one, at least admittedly, had heard this story before this time. And this, you know, really scared us. And this guy was called the Red Man of Rodingen, and he was from the Belgian town that was, you know, some 8-10 miles away, actually, on the other side. But this girl, and it freaked us all out, and we were like, oh, God, oh, God, oh, God, you know, my brother and I, of course, it's haunted, the whole area. And this girl got so freaked out by it that I remember she ended up going home early. And to this day, I can just remember this mood that was after this happened. This mood that was on the dig, and there was only like 2 weeks left in that season. But she went home like that week because it had freaked her out so bad.
Well, those are kind of freaky circumstances anyway. I mean, any dig, anything old like that in such an exotic location, to have that happen, I could understand it would go to work on your mind.
Yeah. It was quite an experience. I remember it to this day.
Appreciate the story, sir. Thank
All right.
you.
Good night.
There's one from Europe. That's another thing. These stories that you're hearing are not confined at all to this country. Our program is in Canada and Mexico, I guess. And so those are the ones we're hearing. But I guarantee you that with a serious, we're not going to laugh at you kind of approach, you could put this program on in Europe, any nation, any language, and you could get the same kind of responses. Toll-free line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, Art. This is Kirk in Medford, Oregon.
Hello, Kirk. What do you have for us?
Well, I've had some strange things happen to me in the mid-'50s. We lived in a house in California on Garden Grove Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a kid of maybe about 10, 11. And I had trouble, like, going in the bedroom. It seems that things happened. And I was uncomfortable, and I just was afraid to go in this bedroom we had in this house. I didn't like it. And one night, my grandparents came over, and we had dinner and such. And just as they were leaving, I just happened to walk by my bedroom. I was getting ready to go to bed, and I saw the curtain move. And just out of the corner of my eye, and I had a bad feeling. And I looked over, and I could hardly believe my eyes. And I didn't want to go in the bedroom, but it turned out it was time to go to bed, so we did. And when I went in there, no sooner had I been on the bed for more than 2 or 3 minutes, it seemed unreasonably dark, and I started to panic. And I noticed my window being open, a slight breeze coming in, and it was unreasonably cold. And with no warning, this unusual ghost-like being floated through the window. And I got the impression that it was female. I don't know why. It had white hair that almost looked like straw. And I tried so hard to scream. And it's an odd sensation. I know I was awake. I wasn't dreaming because, I was aware of...
Let me guess, the scream wouldn't come.
Well, it did slightly. It did slightly, but I just couldn't get it out. And this being floated toward me, and it grabbed my hand. And as I was starting to scream, and actually, I was making sounds, it tied something around my finger, and then I was completely immobile. It then kind of floated me up out of bed and by the window, and I actually floated out the window, and I got the sensation when I was floating that I was like on a magic carpet. And I remember being floated toward a light, and I remember being poked and prodded and I got the weirdest sensation, you know, like almost like a tickling sensation. I noticed a buzzing sound, and then I don't remember much after that. I remember being back in bed.
You know what I would say to you, sir?
What's that?
And I don't know if it'd be right or not, but I would say if you ever have the opportunity, get a hypnotist to regress you. What you may have experienced may not have been so much a ghost story as it is an abduction story.
And that's what kind of scares me because I'll tell you something. Several months after that, I was back in my bedroom, and talk about closets. I was laying in bed. My little brother used to hop in bed with me. You know, I was used to that. You know, he'd hop in bed. He got scared a few times.
Sure.
But one night, my little brother was not in the bedroom, and it turns out that I felt something next to me, touching me all over, and it felt like claws. And it was the weirdest, most awful thing. And it pushed me in the closet, inside the closet, and the door went shut. And that time I did manage to scream. My mother came in and turned the light on and found me in there, and I was shaking hysterical.
All right. I appreciate the call, sir. There it is, another closet story. I suggest to you all, and you need not do it. It's your business. But if you have an open closet now, close it. I want to remind you all that our new newsletter, the inaugural edition of our newsletter, is just coming out. And if you would like to get it, a subscription to the newsletter, it'll be 16 pages long, is just $29.95. In it, you will find two of the more convincing ghost photographs, along with a lot more, that I've ever seen. To order our newsletter, and of course I'm only discussing this aspect of it this morning, it's really very comprehensive, with a lot of inside stuff about this program and the network and talk radio in general. The number to call, $29.95 with your credit card, 1-800-917-4278. 1-800-917-4278. Tell them you want After Dark. Or you can send a check or money order to Chancellor Broadcasting, 744, that's 744 East Pine, P-I-N-E, Central Point, Oregon, 97502, 97502. So if you want to do it that way, it's fine. You don't need to call. Just send a check or money order. That'll get you a full year. To Chancellor Broadcasting, 744 East Pine, as in pine tree, Central Point, Oregon, zip code 97502. On the wild card line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, this is David from Sacramento.
Hi, David.
And this isn't a story. This is a true account, I swear to God.
Well, that's fine.
In 1976, I was on a National Outdoor Leadership Mountaineering School in the Wind River Range in Laramie, Wyoming.
Yes, sir.
And it's an ancient range, and Indians have lived there for thousands of years. After about 25 days on this trip in these remote areas, me and my camp partner had just finished dinner. We needed some water for our tea. It was really dark, and we set off for the river, and it was only about 30 feet away. We started down the small trail and could hear the babbling sounds coming from the river just a few feet away. Suddenly, it just grew pitch black, and the forest seemed to close in all around us. We could just make out vague shapes and dark apparitions, and the sounds of the water were replaced by like a whooshing sound.
Mm-hmm.
Everything seemed to spiral around us, and like water going down a drain. It scares me now just to think about it. All my energy seemed to drain away from my body, and I remember falling over forest branches, and everything seemed to have an oozy, formless, and kind of black quality.
Boy, that is frightening.
Yeah, we were screaming for our lives and couldn't understand why no one else could hear us. The next thing I remember is my knees were getting weak, and I had this kind of sinking feeling.
Yeah.
I was about to collapse, and then I felt a rough, rocky surface, and my friend was inching along with me just a few feet behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly I found a flat spot, and I collapsed into it. I just sat there exhausted and told my friend to wait there until the morning. All night long I waited there, and it just staring into this utter blackness, and I was seeing like these electrical charges. They were a bluish-white streak.
Yes.
And finally, just at the light of dawn, I could see from the new sun the river not more than 50 feet away.
Wow.
Yeah, we were on the other side of this river, and although our shoes weren't wet, I could see these camps where our parties were.
Yes.
And I still don't know how they didn't hear us screaming. But the strangest thing is that we were 25 feet off the ground on a cliff, and I was just sitting there in a cubby hole. It was shaped like a perfect chair with a back and a seat, and the armrests were there too. And we were experienced rock climbers, and we had difficulty getting down the sheer face. Later I looked up, and you'd never see that chair unless you'd actually sat there before. We told our guide who was taking us on this trip, and he said that we were in a Shoshone Indian burial ground.
Oh.
And had experienced a Wind River turnaround. He said it's a real common experience of many people in that area. But for the rest of that trip, it lasted 35 days. The forest just seemed somehow darker and more sinister. And I noticed the trees were black and the scary mosses hanging down everywhere.
It's what you were looking for.
Well, it was something else.
Thank you, my friend. That's a good story. Take care. Burial grounds. Why? Why do spirits stay in the area where they left? Or in the area of their physical bodies? Or in homes? Or connected to material objects? Why? These are questions we may not answer in this life. On the toll-free line, you're on the air. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Just fine.
I have a real quick story.
All right, where are you?
Omaha, Nebraska.
Welcome to the program. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. When I was about 17 years old, I lived in Louisiana with my mom and my stepdad and my sister.
Yes.
We lived out in the country. And I don't know if you've ever been to Louisiana on a hot July night when it's kind of foggy. It's kind of spooky anyway.
It's a kind of a spooky state in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a real spooky state. And this story, no one believes it. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. It's just the truth.
That's all right.
I drove out to the country one night and drove out to our house. We had a long gravel road, and our house was about 200 yards back from the main road. We actually lived at the end of a cul-de-sac, and we were the only house out there. And I got home, and I pulled into the driveway, and we were all sitting around the living room, my sister, my mom, and I. And the dog started barking. We had 2 Labrador retrievers, and they were barking at the front door. And I opened the front door, thinking it might be a deer they were barking at, or another wild dog or something.
Of course.
And they ran straight like a rabbit across our yard and then across the cul-de-sac into the lot across from us. It was an all wooded area. And they were back in the woods for maybe 10, 20 seconds, and they started hightailing it back to the house. And, I'm not that brave, but I'm brave enough to get a flashlight and walk around and see what's, in the woods across the street from my house.
Mm-hmm.
As I walked across the yard, my sister and my mom, they weren't going to go with me. The dogs followed me to the end of our yard and wouldn't go across the street with me. I walked across the street. I guess I'd been maybe 5 or 10 feet into the woods across from our house when my sister just screamed, just bloody murder. And I turned to look at her, and when I did that, she said, just run back to the house. And I did. I ran as fast as I could. And when I got back to the house, I said, what was the deal? And she said, just turn around real slow and look out in those woods. And right where I had been, maybe 5 or 10 feet from where I had been standing, there were these 2 red glowing eyes.
Oh, my God.
And I have never in my life, listen, it gives me the willies thinking about it now. I've never in my life felt more terror. We went in the house. We called the sheriff. The sheriff came out, rummaged around. There was nothing out there. Absolutely nothing. But for the rest of the time, the rest of my life in the country, in that Louisiana town, at any given night, unearthly screams and weird stuff in those woods, and as soon as I could, I moved out. The creepiest thing, I can't explain those eyes, were just the weirdest.
I would, too. I'd be gone. Red eyes in the woods? Oh, no.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's a ghost or not, but it was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen.
Well, it definitely qualifies, sir, and I take it nothing like it has ever happened to you since.
Well, I've had other odd things happen in my life. If I can tell you one more, this is very quick.
Very quick.
Again, in Louisiana, when I lived in New Orleans, I have a story I like to call the skeleton story. When I was a small child, I must have been 4 or 5, I have the remembrance of waking up in my bed on 2 occasions and a blue pale light coming from outside my window. I open up, I just pull the curtain aside, and there's like two skeleton faces outside my window, and it scared the crap out of me. Then, on another occasion, I saw another blue light in my hallway, and the skeleton figure walked right down the hallway into my sister's room, and that's all I remember.
That'll do. I appreciate your call, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your calls. This has been a pleasure. You have just heard the 1994 edition of our annual Halloween show. I thank you. It's been a good week of talk radio. This program will repeat Sunday night, Monday morning on Halloween. We will be here with a Dreamland on Sunday evening. And we will resume the syndicated program next week. Don't forget to get a copy of this program, and I can imagine you might want one, or to get our new newsletter with Visa or MasterCard, call 1-800-917-4278. 1-800-917-4278. Thank you all, those who sent faxes. I didn't get to all of them. I'm sorry. I've got a whole stack here. It's been a wonderful night of talk radio. We could use hours more, but don't have them. Take care. Good night.